Okay, I'm back. Again, discussing this wonderful book, The Black Poets. Great book. Fun book. Hope you gotten a copy. If you haven't, get one. If you're not planning on getting one, don't tell me that. Be savvy. Don't be too honest with me, you guys. If you learn one thing from this class, it's like just keep it to yourself. Unless it's going to benefit you somehow. Don't be honest with me. All right, so back with this book. We're going to read selections from this book for the rest of the semester, so I really want you to have it. It's really required for the question you need to answer. And we're going over now the beginning of the book, this part called folk, seculars, and then the spirituals. What's a folk secular? Whereas you probably remember, secular means anything having involving human activity that's not involving religion. So secular means just in the absence of religion. So poetry that's not referring to God and so on. CUNY is a secular institution. You don't have to belong to Christianity or any religion to go to CUNY. You can have no religious affiliation at all. You can be an atheist like me and work at CUNY. It's fine. So, looking here, I'm on page 5. Let's start on page 5. What you see in the secular poems is a lot of humor, a lot of pain, a lot of this is poetry from the period when blacks in America were not allowed to learn to read and write and be educated. They were slaves. They were property. To have them be educated, as Frederick Douglass documents so famously in his autobiography, to be educated, to be taught to read and write was like a crime. You could be punished with all kinds of horrible sanctions for daring to read and write if you were an enslaved person in the United States prior to 1865. And educational disparities remain in place for African Americans. It's a sad fact, and mostly has to do with poverty and disinvestment these days. But it's the same. It's an ongoing issue in our culture. So let's look at like just these are great, but let's just read the very first one, this humorous one. He paid me 7. And this is a poem about you go to work, as some of you do, I'm sure. Go to work all day, bust your ass. And when that paycheck comes in a couple weeks, it always seems like that's it. Like, can I get some more? Okay. He paid me 7. And again, the way Randall chooses to relate the poems with all the strange misspellings is meant to signify both the dialect that they would be heard in, some sort of southern drawl, maybe Creole in some cases and so on, and then also the lack of literacy, the lack of education on the part of people who are just exchanging poetry orally. All right, our Father, which are in heaven. White man owe me 11 and pay me 7. Owe me 11, pay me 7. Rip me off for $4 out of 11. That's almost half. The kingdom come, thy will be done. And if I hadn't tucked that, I would have get none. Great poem. Mocking at the religiosity, the piety of white people, bringing Christianity and the notion of charity and being respectful to your betters, and that's how you get into heaven. Mocking all that by just saying, look, they talk all this stuff about loving your neighbor and being good to each other, and then when it comes down to brass tacks and it's time to get paid, they steal my wages. He paid me 7 when he owed me 11. Great short poem. Wonderful poem. And I do want to talk about John Henry, but Let's look at one other poem before we talk about the big one, John Henry. On page 16 now. This one right here. The Slave Marriage Ceremony Supplement. So slaves could get married. They did have families, but they weren't treated like human beings. They had no rights to determine their own lives. So you could be very easily, families would be separated very cruelly all the time. Especially after it became illegal to import people from Africa in the United States in the early 19th century. Slave breeding in the United States became breeding people for characteristics, whatever, became a huge business and a huge trade, and that meant, separating families, separating spouses, separating children from their parents, and so on. And just to give you some sense of what a business it was, at the time of the Civil War, beginning in 1861, the total value of owned people, the total value of all slaves in the United States, made it one of the largest sectors and sources of wealth in the United States at the time. Sorry, I'm getting these texts as usual. Okay, so this kind of humorous, but laughing at things that they can't control, things that are actually terrible. It's sort of dark humor, black comedy, gallows humor here, and there's a wonderful tonality to this poem. I'll try to read it. I struggle with the spelling mistakes, just like you all do, but I'll do my best here. Slave Marriage Ceremony Supplement. Dark and stormy may come to wetter. I genus dis hemale and dis shemale together. Let none but him that makes the thunder put dis hemale and dis shemale asunder. I therefore announce you both the same. Be good, go long, and keep up your name. The broomsticks jumped, the world's not wide. She's now your own. Salute your bride. Wonderful. A he-male and a she-male. I love that. And some of the misspellings are just charming. Therefore announced they both, man and wife, both the same. It's nice kind of equality between the sexes there, not man and wife, but both the same. I love that. Now let's look at this, and this will be the poem where I'll play some music. John Henry on page 12 is a long poem, and I'll read it first, and then we'll listen to some musical arrangements. John Henry is sort of like, to make a comparison, he's sort of like the black Paul Bunyan. He's a mythological figure, folk hero, masculine, sublime, larger than life, superhero-like abilities, known above all for this iconic battle. John Henry was a steel driving man, meaning he was a railroad worker. Railroads were this incredible invention and this way of uniting the whole country through infrastructure that we now sort of take for granted. And John Henry was someone who was so good at hitting in railway pylons with a hammer that there was in this mythical story, there's a bet made. Can he outperform the steam-powered industrial machine that hits in the railroad tires, hits the giant nails into the ground? And in the story, yes, he does defeat the machine, but at a great personal cost. He has a heart attack and kills himself from overwork and exhaustion. So it's a myth in that it brings together some wishes, some political, social realities, the exploitation, the cruel treatment of blacks in their employment, and their overcoming of that. They're through sort of sheer determination, but also being brought down by it, not being able to overcome it as well. So he's a kind of martyr figure, really, for the role of the African American worker in our society, in our economy. And his song has been sung in all kinds of formats. I'll do a little of the singing of it here, but I won't sing the whole thing. Maybe if it strikes me. And maybe you will recognize the tune of it. John Henry. When John Henry was a little boy, you could hold him in the palm of your hand. He said to his pa, when I grow up, I'm gonna be a steel driving man. Gonna be a steel driving man. And it goes on like that. When John Henry was a little baby, sitting on his mama's knee, he said, I Big Bend Tunnel on the CO Road. It's gonna be the death of me. Gonna be the death of me. And he's already sort of foreshadowing what will happen to him. This sort of hero's fate, being determined and his embracing it and sacrificing himself. One day his captain told him how he had bet a man that John Henry would beat his steam drill down, 'cause John Henry was the best in the land. John Henry was the best in the land. John Henry kissed his hammer, white man turned on steam. Shaker held John Henry's steel, was the biggest race the world ever seen. Lord, the biggest race the world ever seen. John Henry on the right side, the steam drill on the left. Before I'll let your steam drill beat me down, I'll hammer my full self to death. Hammer my full self to death. John Henry walked in the tunnel, his captain by his side. The mountain so tall, John Henry so small. He laid down his hammer and cried. Laid down his hammer and cried. John Henry, captain heard a mighty rumbling, said the mountain must be caving in. John Henry said to the captain, it's my hammer swinging in the wind. It's my hammer swinging in the wind. And you see his supernatural abilities there. It's like, what is that, the storm? No, it's just him, this incredibly strong black man swinging a hammer makes you think there's an earthquake or something. John Henry said to Shaker, Shaker, you better pray. Shakers are a Christian sect. For if ever I miss this piece of steel, tomorrow'll be your burial day. Tomorrow'll be your burial day. John Henry said to his Shaker, Lordy, shake it while I sing. I'm pulling my hammer from my shoulders down. Great God Almighty, how she ring. Great God Almighty, how she ring. John Henry said to his captain, before I ever leave town, give me one more drink of that Tomcat gin, and I'll hammer that steam, drive it down. I'll hammer that steam, drive it down. John Henry said to his captain, before I ever leave town, give me a 12-pound hammer with a whalebone handle, and I'll drive that steam driver down. I'll hammer that steam drill down. John Henry said to his captain, oh, man ain't nothing but a man. A man ain't nothing but a man. But before I'll let that steam drill beat me down, I'll die with the hammer in my hand. I'll die with the hammer in my hand. John Henry, the man that invented the steam drill, he thought he was mighty fine. John Henry drove down 14 feet with the steam drill only made 9. Steam drill only made 9. So the drill can put the pylon down 9 feet, and he can put it down 14. He's stronger than the industrial machine. Again, a wish. Is he probably is anyone literally? No, of course, but it's this wish, the triumph of the human spirit over the machinery that's always menacing our ability to make a living under capitalism. Oh, look away over yonder, Captain, you can't see like me. He gave a long and loud, lonesome cry. Lord, a hammer be the death of me. Hammer be the death of me. John Henry had a little woman. Her name was Polly Ann. John Henry took 6, she took his hammer. She hammered like a natural man. Lord, she handled like a natural man. John Henry hammered on the mountain as the whistle blew for 2:30. The last words his captain heard him say, I done hammered my insides in two. Lord, I hammered my insides in two. Meaning he's killed himself with overwork. The hammer that John Henry swung, it weighed over 12 pounds. He broke his rib in his left hand side, and his entrails fell on the ground. And his entrails fell on the ground. John Henry, oh John Henry, his blood is running red. Fell right down with his hammer to the ground, said, I'll beat him to the bottom, but I'm dead. Lord, I beat him to the bottom, but I'm dead. When John Henry was laying there dying, the people all by his side, the very last words they heard him say, give me cool drink of water before I die. Cool drink of water before I die. John Henry had a little woman. The dress she wore was red. She went down the track and she never looked back, going to where her man fell dead. Going where her man fell dead. John Henry had a little woman. The dress she wore was blue. Does he have more than one woman? Maybe. The very last words she said to him, John Henry, I'll be true to you. John Henry, I'll be true to you. Who's gonna shoes your little feet? Who's gonna glove your hand? Who's gonna kiss your pretty, pretty cheek? Now you done lost your man. Now you done lost your man. My mama's gonna shoes my little feet. Papa gonna glove my hand. My sister's gonna kiss my pretty, pretty cheek. Now I done lost my man. Now I done lost my man. They carried him down to the river, carried him in the sand, and everybody that passed that way said, there lies a steel driving man. There lies a steel driving man. They took John Henry to the river, buried him in the sand, and every locomotive come a-roaring by says, there lies a steel driving man. Lord, there lies a steel driving man. Some say he came from Georgia, and some from Alabama, but it's wrote on the rock of the Big Bend Tunnel that he was an East Virginia man. Lord, Lord, he was an East Virginia man. And that notion of East Virginia, thank you. I know my singing's not great, but what are you gonna do? It's a goddamn pandemic, and I'm stuck at home. East Virginia, why is it so significant in African American history? The very first blacks who were brought here as slaves, as property, against their own will, were brought to East Virginia, to a place now called Hampton, Virginia, where, if you know anything about basketball, one of the greatest players of my generation in the NBA is from this town of Hampton, Allen Iverson. And there's a wonderful movie called No Crossover, great documentary about the persistence of racial class hierarchies, the persistence of racism in the city of Hampton, and how that all played out when Allen Iverson was arrested as part of a fight at a bowling alley when he was in high school, and his whole career and going to college and everything was almost jeopardized. So East Virginia, powerful cultural signifier in African American experience, and a fitting place to locate this guy, this wonderful folk hero, John Henry's birth, in this place where so many blacks, so many African Americans were spending their lives wasted in fruitless toil for generations, to then evoke it as the birthplace of this transcendent folk hero for African American experience is a really fitting and touching detail of this poem. And I'm going to come back at you talking about some performances of that song, and then also looking at the next few pages of the book, which are these spirituals, which begin on page 23. And we'll talk about this wonderful writer, this wonderful singer and actor and lawyer and political activist, Paul Robeson, a sort of forgotten and neglected, but incredibly important figure in American and African American history and culture. So I'll be back with you in another video in a second.